Hello, N4HNH here with my first Elecraft purchase. This is the Elecraft KPA-1500 legal limit amplifier using two LDMOS finals. I did not purchase this new. It's interesting how I acquired it. I purchased it from an auction. You want to read more about it, it's in the text below the video here. But I am the first person to use it. It was purchased in July of 2019 and never put in service. So it was literally still packed in the box with the original receipt. So long story short, a gentleman who purchased it purchases a lot of high-end gear, ran into some health issues and decided to start liquidating some of his gear. So I got it for about 60% of what it costs new. After a couple of weeks of operation, which, look at the thing, it's just gorgeous. And, you know, the form factor, as we say in engineering, is just spectacular. Very, very aesthetically pleasing and ergonomic. I used it a couple of weeks and then it failed. It failed when I went to the 160 meter band. At full legal limit. So that meant that I had to get in touch with Elecraft, and we did some troubleshooting over the phone. There's some software that you can download from their site and hook up to the amp via a USB port, and for that matter you can control the amp via the software. But also the software can extract data files, particularly the fault log as well as the configuration file. And if you send that to Elecraft, they can troubleshoot it without, having to have it on their workbench. Now, it was determined that the failure was, as I suspected, a failed LDMOS. When it failed, it went into fault mode. So you see right here, let me focus. It faults out and it goes into standby. So it'll switch from operate to standby and you'll get a fault LED. And you can press the reset to reset the fault. And most of the time that's not a problem. So one of the faults might be that you would drive it with too much power. It does not take more than 40 watts to get to legal limit. So that would be one fault. You could also, of course, get a fault from a high SWR, various other things. The fault that I was getting after this happened was low gain. And actually what would happen is the amp would try to produce about 180 watts for a few seconds, and then it would fault again with this low gain warning. So the fact that it was producing about 180 watts kind of tells you that it's probably a failure of one of the LDMOS finals. There are two in there. Each are capable of 1400 watts, by the way. So it's not really punishing the amp very much when you do run legal limit. Ironically, the failure, you can read more about it in the comments in my text here below the video, but the failure had to do with the gate of the LDMOS, not the power output side. Elecraft did some improvements. They replaced both LDMOS finals and did some other improvements. Among them, the fan runs quieter now, has a better duty cycle, and they did a big mod to the what they call the gain flattening resistors, which essentially, with a tube amplifier, you may have noticed that you have to have more drive on 160 meters and say 10 meters to get the same output you might get with less drive on the 14 megahertz, 40 meters, 20 meters. So the solid state, is a little different. It can produce the full output, with relatively low drive, and this one was producing full output with about 35 watts before I sent it in. But the technician Renee, very, very helpful, very patient with me, answering all my questions, explained that they'd had a couple of more fail like this with in the 80 meter and 160 meter band, and it had to do with the resistors that control the amount of gain. Literally, they drive the gate of the LDMOS. So the gate failed, not the power output side, and they've modified this one now. So now what it means is I'll have to drive it with a little bit more power from the exciter to get, you know, the full output. Okay, well, what I'm finding is around 40 watts is giving me 1500 watts. So 40 watts of drive now as opposed to the 33 to 35 that it used to be. So bottom line is, I got to tell you, I received excellent service from Elecraft, some of the best service I've ever received. From the initial phone call where I talked to a guy named Doug who helped me troubleshoot it, to Renee, the guy that did the repair, and then called me back when I had a question and went into great detail with me about what he did. So I feel a lot more confident about the amp now that they can say, yeah, we had a couple others fail where the gate of the LDMOS failed, and we have improved that. They protect the LDMOS a little more so now with this gain flattening that they did. So with all that as a backdrop, I just wanted to say, oh, I should also mention that I was not the original purchaser, so I was not eligible for warranty repair. But Eric, the owner, made an exception since I'd only been using the amp for 2 weeks, and I was the guy that unpacked it, so it was a little bit of a special circumstance there, and I sure do thank Elecraft for that consideration. So I want to show you a little bit about how the amp works. You've got a digital display up here. I don't want to make the video too long, but you can click through the menu. There's firmware version 2.38. That is the latest version of the firmware. And so you have, let's see here, fan speed, band change, all these ATU, tell it, when you want the auto tuner. It has an auto tuner when you want it to stop. There's a lot of things in here. I'm just going to get back to status. You can see it's got a digital readout of power output. It's telling me the current temperature is 26 Celsius, 0 amps are being drawn, and it's set for 14 megahertz. There are your band switches. You can press them, or you can purchase a cable that connects between the amplifier and the rig, and that cable then, of course, changes the band, literally the filters in the amplifier according to the band you have selected on your radio. You have, of course, the operate and standby that I mentioned earlier, and it has 2 antenna ports on the back. I currently only use the 1 antenna port because I don't like to bring my antennas directly into my amp. My antennas come through an alpha delta switch so that it's they can be put to ground when I'm not operating. So I'm only using antenna port 1, and it also, like I said, has a built-in antenna tuner. It is currently in bypass because I have this Palstar AT Auto that I generally use for an antenna tuner. And I should mention, there's my AL80B, the good old faithful backup, 21 years old, still has the original AL80B in it, still works great, but cannot produce legal limit, of course. Now this thing, I don't really run it much more than 800 watts, so it's just loafing along at 800 watts. And like I said, the failure was the gate, not the power output side. These LDMOS finals being able to handle 1400 watts each, or produce 1400 watts each, are loafing along at 800 watts. Okay, so here we go. Back to the exciter here, the radio I'm going to drive it with. I'm at 7.15 megahertz. I'm going to set the drive. Look in the display there. I'm going to set the drive to 20 watts just to provide a good starting point. Like I said, I don't want the video to be too awful long. So here we go. You've got what they call, Elecraft calls up here, this bar graph, they call that the speedometer. Let me focus a little bit. That's a quick way to glance over and see what your power output is. It will also give you a very detailed indication of power output here in the digital display. And I should mention, I've checked this against both my Autech Research computing watt meter and my Daiwa CN801. And the watt meters and the amp are really, really accurate, very accurate. And so much so, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you might have remembered there was a watt meter sitting above the radio. I've taken it out of line. I don't really need it anymore. It's nice to just glance over and look at the LEDs to see what the power output is. So I want you to notice something though. I'm not on 7 megahertz, but the radio is. So watch what's going to happen here. I'm going to go ahead and speak real quick. Hello. You see, it automatically it has a built-in frequency counter, and it automatically detected the frequency really even before I could even get the word hello out, and it automatically changed the band setting. So that's a pretty cool feature. And again, you can get a cable that'll make it just instant. It just switches with the radio, or you can reach over and press the button. All right, let's look at some power output here. So again, I'm driving it with 20 watts. What's the speedometer up there? And again, I've already checked and made sure that what that indicator there says does in fact match my calibrated watt meter. I'm going to go into the dummy load here. Hello. I'm in AM mode. That's why I'm seeing so much power. Let me go. Here we go. I was in AM because I was tuning later a while ago. So here we go. Hello, 1 2 1 2 1 2. So we're getting about 900 watts there. Let's see. It's getting between. Okay, there you go. Look over there on the digital display. There we go. It's flirting right around 900 watts at 20 watts drive. So I'm going to increase the drive to 25 watts. You see the little green indicator? It went away now, but that's how the Yaesu 5000 works. Anytime you touch one of these knobs down here and make a change, it shows you what the setting is there. All right, so now here we'll see what we get with 25 watts of drive. N4HNH testing. Hello, hello, hello. So we're somewhere in the 1100 range. Looks like it's, let me get the display going there. It looks like we're somewhere in the, yeah, right around 1100, near it. We're definitely flirting right on the edge of hello, 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 hello. Yeah, right around 1100. All right, so let's see what happens if I increase the drive to 30 watts. November 4 hotel, November hotel testing. So now we're in between. We're approaching 1300. So again, the digital display is giving us a readout here. Hello, 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 hello. So there we go. Yep, we're right about 1300. Somewhere in between 12 and 1300, depending on how I modulate it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and increase it to the drive to 35 watts. And now we're hitting right at legal limit. Now, let me unkey here a second. One of the things they did to improve the amplifier is they increase the resistance of the gain flattening resistors for 80 meters and 160 meters, which means I'll have to drive it a little bit harder to get full output on those bands, but it's to protect the sensitive gate of the LDMOS. So that's one of the things that they discovered, when they had a few of these fail on 80 and 160 meters. Mine did okay on 80. It failed on 160. So, all right, let me tell you a little something about AM operation, though. Do not let the amp exceed 375 watts dead key carrier on AM, because if you modulate 100%, that's going to put you at legal limit. And the other thing, and that's an advice I got directly from the technician who worked on this amp, Renee. And but he said okay to dead key 1500 with FM because it's frequency modulated, not amplitude. So that little note about that. Let's see. I also should mention about the cooling on this thing. You haven't heard the fan kick in yet, but the mods they did improved the cooling on it, and it's running a little quieter, and the duty cycle on it's a little bit less. I didn't even transmit enough yet. With all that I was doing, even hitting 1500 watts, the fan is not engaged yet. I will say, I've asked people over the air, can you hear the fan? They say no. I will admit it's still a little bit more noticeable than the one on the AL80B. That's one of the whisper quiet amps in the world, really. But this is really not objectionable at all, even when the fans kick in. Let me show you where they are. They're on the back side. I'll stand up here so you can see. There they are, 3 of them on the back. There's the exhaust. And I should mention the power supply. Let me go over here. There's the power supply. It runs on 240 volts, and it has, as you can see, big DC cable for the 50 volts feeding the RF deck. Then you'll also see this D-sub down here. That's actually a lot of other different varying, there's just various voltages there going into the digital portions of the amplifier. Big wires, big Anderson power pole. So there's the power supply. And again, back over to the amp. I want to show you quickly here the antenna tuner. And let me tell you something too. One more thing about, as far as the dead key, the carriers and all. Renee told me that when he tests the amp, he does a burn-in. He transmits full 1500 watts. He actually puts it in data mode, like simulating FT8. A full 1500 watts every 15 seconds. So 15 seconds transmit, 15 seconds rest for 4 days. So again, very robust, these LDMOS finals as far as the power. Like I said, each one of them can produce 1400 watts. So it was the gate that was sensitive, and they did the improvement to protect against the gate failure. So all right, let me show you a little bit about the antenna tuner. I'm going to take it offline here a second. Not a good idea to tune while you're set to operate. Now I've been in the dummy load, so let me move it over to an antenna. I'm going to use my, I'll go to my doublet. So that's 250 feet of wire fed with that window line coming into the back of the Palstar AT Auto. There's a 4-to-1 balun in there. And by the way, let me mention something about baluns. If you buy baluns, don't spare expense on getting a good balun. And antennas too, when you buy antennas and they say, oh, rated for 1500 watts, buy the one that says 3000 or at least 2000 watts. Because if you get a cheap balun, you can saturate the core of that balun, and that can cause a premature failure of solid state amps. Tube type amp will be more forgiving, but not a solid state amp. So like Elecraft mentioned, yes, the amp has all these protective circuits in it, and it will do its best to protect itself. But after so many times, eventually it is going to, you're going to have some, law of averages says sooner or later, some failure is going to kill it. So one thing is to be absolutely sure you have a very good antenna system. Again, solid state amps are just not as forgiving as a tube amp. All right, so let me show you the antenna tuner. Right now, with the balanced antenna, I'm going to go ahead and go into AM mode. And I'm going to transmit with it in standby so you can watch the SWR meter. Also, by the way, it has an SWR meter. Remember I told you the Elecraft folks call this a speedometer? Well, here's another type of speedometer meter for SWR, though it does also read out SWR in the lower right corner of the display there. All right, so here we go. Look at that SWR off the scale. So I'm going to engage the antenna tuner. Notice that it's flashing, indicating that it needs to be tuned. So there you go, that quick. So obviously what it does is it operates from memory. So if I go to some frequency that I've never used before, it may take a little longer to tune it. So matter of fact, watch this. Let's just really put it through the ringer here. I'm going to switch over to, I don't know, let's see, I'll go to 18 megahertz. Now notice I didn't press the button for 18 megahertz. I really should, but watch what happens. Let me get AM. Now it shows me the high SWR. I'm going to put it in tune mode just by momentarily tapping that button. The display even said needs exciter power. And see, it's already tuned. It's really, really fast. One other thing I should mention about the antenna tuner before I stop the video, boy, it's getting long. It can handle up to a 3-to-1 SWR at full output, legal limit. Anything above that, up to a 10-to-1, it will still tune, but it will need to reduce the output. so it will reduce the output. So I'm going to keep the Palstar in line just to be careful. Okay, so you know, because I am going to be running you know, close to legal limit at times, maybe to bust a pile up. Most of the time, though, I actually let it coast along at about 800 watts. So, but that is a good internal antenna tuner, you know, similar to the LDGs, where it uses the long press, by the way, to put it back into bypass, where it uses the relay circuits in there to switch in the different LC networks to do the tuning. All right, so there's as quick as I could get it through. It's a 20-minute video here, but I wanted to give you a quick background, how I acquired the amplifier. And, you know, yes, okay, it failed, but the service was spectacular. And they've even assured me any more problems, let them know. And so just wanted to shoot this video and show you what a handsome amplifier it is, how very, very aesthetically pleasing it is, and the ergonomics on it are great, although you really don't have to press a whole lot other than, I pretty much just find myself pressing the standby operate button. Okay, 73 from N4 HNH. Hope you found that helpful.